Thanks, Lee. Oh, that's great. Low expectations. That's where I like to live. My name is Whitney Maxwell. I'm excited to be here with you today, work with Patrick. So that's how I kind of heard about the conference and was able to be here today. I'm excited to talk to you about this project that I've been working on for a little while. It's called an analysis of the size and impact of digital footprints. And I can give you a little bit of introduction about myself. I am a penetration tester for Rapid7. Prior to that, I was on the red team at Microsoft. And I'll be on the panel later today with Chris talking about the DEF CON SC CTF, which I'm also participating in this summer. So if you come to DEF CON, come support. We always like to see friendly faces in the crowd. But anyway, let's get on to what my project is about. So what even is this? It's a lot of words, seems a little cliche. So it's a couple of things. The first one is to test theoretical classifications of personal information. And what that means is that there are people who have classified information of, hey, this is higher value stuff like your credit card and your your social security number. And then this is lower end stuff like your hobbies or your favorite color. And I actually wanted to put that to the test of, do those classifications actually mean that it's harder to obtain things like your social security number over a hobby, or is that just kind of theoretical? So actually testing those out. The second one, which is what I was most passionate about, is discovering a way to help people understand the status of their personal information and its availability online. And we'll get to this a little bit into how this actually inspired the project, but this is what I really wanted, was at the end of the project to be able to hand something to a person and say, this is what your personal information looks like online, and actually have it make sense. And the third one was that this fulfilled a thesis requirement for me getting my master's degree from Brigham Young University. So there's a lot of kind of academic things that didn't apply that I stripped out of this presentation, but initially that's where I got the idea, and really excited to share it with you. So why go about this? And it came about when I was having a discussion with, I don't remember who, but the important thing is that I remember the content, is I realized that I didn't even know the status of my own personal information. I couldn't explain what that looked like when someone said, hey, what information of yours is out there on the internet? And I've Googled myself, I've looked myself up before with various OSINT tools, but I couldn't communicate that, and it bothered me. I'm very careful with my privacy settings. I'm very limited with what I share on social media or even just via technology itself, and it still bothered me that I didn't even know what my information looked like. And if I didn't know that, someone who's actually in the industry and who does this every single day, what about my mom or my neighbor? How would they have a chance of knowing if I don't know? So here's the problem. There are a couple of things that are contributing to this. The first is personalized technology and advertising depend on user information. So things like Google Ads and a lot of the things that we see that target, like advertisers are using, are depending on your personal information to make advertisements very specific and thereby very appealing to you as a person, not just Target's having a sale. It's Target is having a sale on those shoes that you really liked 2 weeks ago. That's what they're going after. And because of that, there's a lot of money backing accessing personal information. That's the first problem. The second one is that user information is often leaked to first and third party sites without user knowledge. And I might even amend that by saying user understanding, because a lot of it is, hey, we have an app, just click the user agreement, and there's so much legalese that people don't really understand what they're giving away, and things that they're using every day, they're just not really understanding what's leaking out. So that's the second problem. The third one is there are a lot of studies that a lot of users are expressing concern over their personal information, but that doesn't translate to action. I'm really concerned about my personal information, but they're not actually doing anything to protect their information. They're just really concerned about it, but they're not protecting it. So why is that happening? And I think it's because a lot of people don't even know where to start. How do you start by controlling your information when it's everywhere? And finally, tracking where and how personal information is exposed is difficult. So if you Googled yourself a year ago, chances are that's changed if you did it today, and it might change tomorrow. And so how do you constantly stay on top of that when it's constantly changing? So here's a study. And this GIF has nothing to do with the study. It's just one of my favorite GIFs of all time. So you can just watch this. I know. This like little Chinese baby, if I could adopt her, I would, because she's just amazing. Like, look at those reflexes. I mean, anyway. So the study that I designed was a small case study, just because this was a thesis, not a PhD. If it was going to be bigger, I would have demanded a higher degree. So this was designed to go for around 10 research participants, and I wanted to actually deep dive into every single one of them and do a lot of research and OSINT, like just looking whatever I could find using public available tools, what I could find for each of those people. From that, I wanted to assess the impact of the exposure. Okay, so I found a high school picture of you and the fact that you were on the lacrosse team 20 years ago. How impactful is that versus this other person and all the information that they found? So looking at the information and looking at kind of how damaging the information was that I could find. And then finally providing a metric to measure the extent, so how much I found, and also the impact, how damaging all the information was. So this is the design that wasn't my original design, but when you use human research participants in a subject, you have to go through the institutional review board, and they look at all the requirements. And their initial requirement was, you have to tell us exactly what you're going to get from every single person. And my answer was, if I knew that, I wouldn't have to do this research. But they really didn't like, when I said, I'm just gonna hack people, see what I can find, they were not impressed by that at all. And so we kind of came up with a kind of an in-between. It ended up becoming more of a capture the flag of sorts, instead of just kind of an open-ended, see what I could find, to appease the IRB so that they could sleep at night. So when I referenced those layers before on the first slide, these are they're fancy names, but essentially all it means is that as you go from top to bottom, the information tends to be less valuable. And I put that in air quotes. So you have things that are very personal to you, that are generally unique, that when combined, your birthday, name, email address, that usually resolves down to one person. Expand that a little bit wider, an intermediate layer, hometown, current city, religion, those three things might apply to a smaller group of people. And then the core layer are things that could apply to a much broader group of people. A lot of them, it's also known as like the favorites and tastes layer, like favorite music, books, TV. And so I started off with this with each research participant, and then with two initial pieces of information. I had their email address and I had their phone number. That's what I used to do the research. I did have some additional information as well, because I needed to know I was going after the right person, so I could kind of check my results and make sure that what I was finding was the right person. There was one person that she has the exact same name, and it was like an old lady in Washington, and she kept coming into my results, and I was like, go away. You're not who I'm looking for, but she would have been a great red herring. So what it ended up looking like is, this is just a sample result page for one of my participants of whenever I found something, I would put down the reference of where I found it so I could go back and recheck it and verify it if I needed to. But essentially, as I started finding things, I would tick the box and put the reference in there. I didn't actually duplicate the information. That helped to protect me, so that if someone got into my stores and found, hey, I found 10 people, like everything about them from this lady who didn't password protect her phone. So this way I was protecting myself and all of these sites that you would have had to know my login as well. So that was just one layer to help protect their information. And from this, I was able to kind of group it a little bit easier. This is essentially what I found from combining all of the information. In the two center, you have phone number over here, and then you have email address over there. It's common, that's what I started with. I wasn't sure what I was going to find. I thought maybe email address might find a couple of things, maybe phone number would lead to something else, and that would reveal a whole bunch of stuff. And I was actually a little surprised to find that just with a phone number and just with an email, I was able to uncover pretty much every category I was looking for. What's interesting to know about the phone number is the red lines are the more dangerous area. That's the layer that's your birthday, your email address, the more personal information. The orange is kind of that intermediate area, your hometown, your religion, your political views. And then the yellow is, your favorites and your hobbies. And as you can see, the phone number actually had more red lines. The email address had more orange lines and a couple of red. And so even though email address still revealed a lot of information, your phone number actually revealed more personal information, and having that was much more key and a little bit more dangerous. And there were some other things you noticed, like photo was not initially on my list, but I told the IRB, I'm like, I'm not going to ignore information I find when I'm looking for these other things. So if I discovered a whole bunch of other stuff while searching for your hometown, I'm not going to turn a blind eye and pretend I didn't see it. I'm still going to include that in my results because they were in the same area. So there are some other things I wasn't looking for, but were there. And for me, that a photo is a little disturbing. This is kind of the same thing, but broken down by probability, meaning what is the probability given the 10 research participants that I researched? What's the probability finding your home address, of finding your hobbies, your high school? And so you should be very alarmed that it was actually a much higher probability of finding the more dangerous information. A little kind of median for the middle, and then the favorites and tastes was kind of all over the place. Either I found it and it was there, or it was actually really kind of hard to find, and I had to kind of scrimp. And I maybe got like a Pandora playlist, and that was it. A couple of things like the current city and the hobbies meant I found it for every single person. That doesn't mean in a bigger group that would obviously dip, but that was also interesting, and also that all of the red stuff is pretty darn high. So now that we have kind of the results, what to do from here. The last pieces I was talking about was I was really inspired that I wanted to communicate the results to the general population in a way that would make sense, that they would understand, like, okay, I get it. This is what you're talking about. So I was inspired from the Fair Isaac Corporation score calculation, your FICO score. Even if you don't know what your FICO score is, at some point you will need to know what it is if you want to buy a house or if you're trying to get a loan. It's your credit score rating, and it's something that's tied to pretty much something you need to do as an adult. And what I liked about the FICO score is that it was a single number, and it's either high or it's low. But what I also liked about the FICO score is that it's meant for you to understand so that you can improve it. If you don't like your FICO score, they tell you on the website, and when you log in and check out your FICO score, they say, this is where you're getting hit. This is what's good. If you want to improve your FICO score, do these steps and you'll see an improvement. And so I liked that. I liked not only was it informational, but it was meant to be a tool for you to improve your score, to actually be better. So I used that to build what I called a PIVA score, a personal information vulnerability assessment. May not be right, but I wanted it to be 4 letters and sound like FICO, but be a little different. So essentially what I did, the PIVA score is on the bottom. It looks complicated. It's not as complicated as it looks, but when I got my thesis, I'm like, this is really complicated. And it took a really long time and a lot of math. It didn't really, but that's okay. It looks complicated. Essentially, all of the, like if you look at the pie chart of the PIVA and the FICO score, they're identical in the breakdowns of the percentages. The categories are obviously different because I'm not measuring your financial, maturity, but I am measuring things like the intermediate layer, that middle layer of information. What was the probability of finding that? That takes up 15%. The smaller layers, the core layer, is your favorites and tastes. The supplemental layer was stuff that I found when I wasn't really looking for, like your photos, additional job information. That kind of went into its own little smaller category because there's bleed over from information that you're revealing. The peripheral layer is that bigger, that red category. And then the biggest category, which I ended up creating and making its own is name and current city, because I found that when I was looking for information, as soon as I unlocked the name and as soon as I unlocked the current city, that was the keys to the kingdom. It got me a lot more than just a name on its own or current city on its own. Those two things together is what really started unlocking things, and I was able to get a lot of stuff. So that is the biggest percentage there. So essentially what this is doing is just taking the weight of either 30% versus the probability of uncovering that for the individual. So there were some who, like their hot, for example, like the core layer, their favorites and their taste, it was really, really hard to find anything about them. They just weren't on social media. It was really difficult to find anything that they had done, like in high school, if they had even visited the White House, because that's public record. Just looking for anything was really tough. You know, their probability of finding that information is way down versus someone who tweets every 5 minutes. Patrick, just kidding. And then I added it all together, multiplied it by 1,000 so we could get a 3-digit score, just like the FICO score. One thing that isn't on here is, because it's implied, is that all of these are conditional probabilities, because in order to get a probability of your peripheral layer, like those really important bits, I had to have something to begin with, and that was the email address and phone number. And so the probability of that is 1, since I already had it, and so it's implied in the calculation. It just got dropped. But I think it would be really interesting to actually do further research and say, what's the probability of even getting that from you in the first place? Because that would make a much more realistic goal, instead of, hey, you gave me something, let me see where I can start, but just starting from ground zero. So going forward, I think that would be cool. So as an example, this was one of my research participants. Their score was 833. And this is very similar to a FICO score graph. If you log in and you look at your FICO score, there's a nice little half rainbow. It has a little arrow showing where you are. And as you can see, this is in the red zone, meaning that of all the FICO scores that I calculated, I put it on a normal distribution, you know, the little bell curve, to see where the average was, and then the standard deviations to see, you know, where they would be outside that. This person was outside the normal range, meaning they had a lot of information out there. I was able to find the VIN number on their car. I was able to find information on the spouse. I was able to find information on children, on where they went to school, all the degrees that they got. I mean, just everything. So not only can they see, hey, this is where I am, you know, how much information you found for me, but it's also showing against the general population, you have a lot of stuff out on the internet. And what I see for something like this is your FICO score communicates to financial institutions kind of your risk. How do you handle credit? How do you handle money? If you don't handle it very well, they're not going to give you very much money. If you're really good with your money and really established, they'll give you a $100,000 loan for a car or $1 million house. Like, you can really, they kind of loosen the purse strings a bit when you show that you're trustworthy. I think it would be interesting if we added something like this to a FICO score for financial institutions to say, hey, Bob is a millionaire. He's great with his money. He has everything on the internet. You could social engineer him and take over his accounts like that, because you know all the answers to the security questions. You could answer all his previous addresses. You could, I mean, you can start to see maybe he's a bigger threat to a financial institution than just dollars and cents. However, if someone is, maybe they don't have a lot on the internet, maybe they're still kind of struggling with their money, but you know what, they're going to be a lot harder to pwn. So maybe we could give them a chance, or maybe they don't have as high of an interest rate. So I see some potential with having people be educated about what's out there on the internet, because it does influence your life. Not just, hey, someone found out my birthday and I'm uncomfortable with that, but it actually influences, you know, your day-to-day. People suffer from fraud all the time. So in conclusion, I had a couple of things to draw away from this, and it's two main things. First one is, information privacy is a growing concern, and more people are taking advantage of it than protecting it. And second, this project is one step towards changing that. I want to put the power back to the people instead of having the people be taken advantage of with their information. I don't think that's okay. Information is yours. It's about you. You should be able to control it. You should be able to say where it is, who sees it. And right now it's just not that way. And it's an opt-out society. I think it should be opt-in. And in the meantime, let's make an effort to take control of it. So that's my presentation. Thank you for your time. And I think we've got a minute for questions. Chris?
How did you decide what the weight was to each of those? Was it based on how much time you had to spend in finding it, or was that calculated automatically?
So this was based on the previous research I had found, was saying they had already categorized it, saying this is information that's more valuable, this is information that's less valuable. So I built on that. However, I think that these weights could definitely be changed based on what I found. Yeah.
Did you add a weight to the time it took you to OSINT it, or was that not part of the calculation? Or just if you found it, yes, no?
That's a good question. That was something that, this is a bit revealing. If I had been a bit more careful with my research, then I could have added that. But I had so many pots in the fire, and my things were just a bit crazy, like going after 10 people, organizing the data. I didn't track carefully enough. Hey, I was able to find, their birthday. I had to go through 10 sites to find it versus this person just took one. At the end of the day, it was just ticking the box. But difficulty is a layer that I wish I could have added. If I had had the data, I would have added it for sure. Yeah.
Has this paper been published?
Yes.
Where can we find it?
I will get you a link. I'll tweet it out. I officially defended, graduated, I'm done. So, and to my surprise, within a week, I got a little notification saying, hey, congratulations, it's on, BYU archives, and 180 people downloaded it. I'm like, what? I'm so sorry. That paper is super boring, but it is out there, and it has my methodology and everything and more. So I'll be sure to get you a link. Yeah?
Can you go into how you can fix your PIVA score, the FICO does?
Yeah, so there is a little bit, in the paper that I go over, like I said, the United States is an opt-out society, so there are some things you can do to redact your information. Sadly, a lot of it is a bit of a pain to do that on your own, but it is possible to do. So there are resources, but what I think would be cool, I need a little bit of distance from this, but it would be cool if this was actually a business to say, we'll find your information, we'll give you the score, and if you want to redact it, we can help you do that. I think that's something that would be really great. So if anyone wants to fund a startup, let me know. Contact me in 6 months though, because I need a break. Yeah.
Could you share some of the reactions you got when the users, your 10 participants, were shown their scores?
Yeah, and what's interesting about this is I think this is a bit skewed, because when I was looking for volunteers, I think the people who actually submitted the name were like, yeah, we'll see what she can find. I've already got stuff pretty locked down. I don't think it was kind of an average, kind of general population what I would have found just picking 10 random people off the street. And so there were some people who had obscured their names, who had given me an email address they didn't use for anything else. They were really shocked with what I could find with just a phone number, because a lot of time your phone number is tied to addresses that you've had, and that can also get tied to jobs that you've had and cars, and your phone number is sadly tied to a lot of stuff because we take it with us, whereas before, whenever you moved, you got a new number. So the reactions were a bit surprising. So yeah.
Did you use only public sources of information, or did you use some of the databases that are out there for commercial use?
So I had a stipulation that I could spend a reasonable amount, and I think that was defined as around $100 per person, because there are some, I think I had on there, where was it?
Yeah, Intellius right there.
So Intellius, I have a subscription. Instant Checkmate, you can see there's a ton of Instant Checkmate stuff on. It was $30, especially a premium white pages subscription. Things that were dollars and cents to an attacker who really wanted to get your information. It was if it was $100 or less to get information on someone, I would be willing to spend that. Otherwise, it was just open source. Yeah.
What about tools you used? Did you use any open source tools?
I used I did use Maltego at the beginning. I was able to get a limited, gave me like a couple months of doing some free searches. The problem with that is as I was doing the research, I wanted to go back and double check some stuff, and it did a pretty good job, but it wasn't as good as some of the other things I had found. So, but yeah, I did try and mix and match and see what I could find, just to be transparent. Yeah.
Well, this is phenomenal. This is
Oh,
boring
thanks.
at all. You set my job offer. I hope you make it a business. I'm just curious, was everyone that you used American?
Yes.
Did
Yeah.
you try any non-American?
No, I would love to expand this and see actually how it differs in different geographic regions. And there was one that sadly I couldn't include their results in the study because by the end I had to also limit it to people who were 18 and older. And I was really interested in actually seeing like the teens, the people who were actually on their screens. And their information was also really interesting because it was hard to find, because actually the internet does do like searches, does do some protection on youth and their information. But with some of the stuff I was able to find, I really wanted to present it, but it got redacted. So that's another study that doing it on youth and then doing it across different geographic regions would be interesting. Yeah.
Were you able to make any observations in your sample of 10, your 10-person sample about, from their age or their location in the country that they tended to have a higher PIVA score than others?
Older.
If you were an attacker and you wanted to target a specific part of the population, you're going to go for the elderly.
Yeah.
Don't have much of an online footprint.
They actually, I thought it would be that way. I thought, well, my parents' generation, older, they're not really on it very much, but actually I found like the 50, 60 age range, I found a lot of stuff, and sadly that's the danger because they're more established. They have more collateral damage. They have more at risk than someone who's 20, theoretically.
They know enough to set up an account, but not enough to lock it down.
Yeah, so I found that they were actually pretty hard to find. The 20 stuff, and again, it could be the people that I was researching were already kind of locked down, but it was more flipped than I had thought.
It would be interesting to see this over time. If we trend towards a less trusting society, the PIVA scores may drop, but yeah, so interesting to see this plot over time.
Yeah. Sorry.
I gathered it on, you made reference to this old lady who kept popping up.
Yes.
I thought that, what was that? I was curious.
So she had the same name and she was in the same geographical location as one of my other research subjects.
But she didn't have all the permissions.
Yeah, so she wasn't who I was looking for. She was not the research participant I was looking for, but she kept coming in my results, and I would get excited, and then I would look, I'm like, oh gosh, there's this bitty old lady who's like everywhere, and she won't go away. So that was it. Yeah.
Part of a small working group on writing a white paper on privacy policy for IEEE, so I really appreciate this work.
Cool.
One thing that has been on my mind about this lately is that it seems like it's impossible to redact this information. It's out there, right? So people may resort to pollution, where they're throwing out these random old people, except it's not random, it's intentional.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, so far it seems like people are not becoming any less trusting. Is that something that you've thought about at all?
That's really interesting, and I don't have a lot of personal research experience to go with that, but I think sadly people have just kind of come to accept it. They've accepted the distrust, but it's not really stopping them. It's not really changing their behavior, and I think part of that is creating a totally different person with your same name but totally different taste. That's a lot of work, and how would you even start doing that? I think that's the missing piece, is people don't know where to start, because it is hard, and it shouldn't be to take claim of your own information, in my opinion.